and a senior content writer at Ahmedabad Book Club. Before everybody joins in, there's something that I'd like to share with you all. There's a saying, there are wounds that never show on the body, that are deeper and more hurtful than anything that bleeds. I realized this more after reading this beautiful book, The Water Phoenix. I must have been on the same campus with the author for more than 5 years, and I sat right behind her for a whole academic year. But after reading this, I realized that how little did I know, how little was visible of those wounds, of, of the wounds that were bleeding. There were scars, there was trauma inside her, which was in plain sight, but yet so invisible. Uh, so today, in the first week of this new decade, we have among us a skilled writer, but at the same time, a person who's succeeded at transcending the trauma and coming back home to herself. Author Rituparna Chatterjee. Ritu is a writer, journalist, columnist, and a foreign correspondent for the Economic Times. For the same newspaper, she writes The California Dreaming, a column about her life as an immigrant mother in America. Her short stories for children have been published in various anthologies. Her first book, An Ordinary Life, was based on the life of an acclaimed actor, Nawazuddin Siddiqui. And Water Phoenix is her second book, a memoir of childhood abuse, trauma, forgiving, and healing. Welcome, Ritu. Welcome to Ahmedabad Book Club page.
Hi, Monica. Lovely to be here.
Okay, Ritu. Before we begin, I mean, I love this whole picture,
Thank you.
the
Yeah.
whole feel of this book. I mean, tell us something about the title, The Water Phoenix, about this mythical creature that you've chosen to title your book as.
hmm So, this is a little girl, and well, it's kind of supposed to be me. And
Yeah.
outside my bedroom window was a huge people tree. This is when my dad was posted in a tiny town called Nandurbar. I grew up all over India because he was in the railways and we got transferred a lot, which is how I ended up at the boarding school. Same with you. And my earliest memories of looking out at the people tree, which is why there are all these leaves here, and into the people tree. And I used to chase this peacock on the way back from school. It was a railway world in a small town. Everything was walking, a lot of nature, and this peacock used to fly into the people tree. So there's a lot of sunlight at the top of the tree, and it disappeared. And I was reading way ahead of my age, so I found out what a phoenix was. So I thought it's a phoenix. But then the sunlight seemed to be little, you know how sunlight is on lakes, on water, a bit shimmery, a bit moving. So I thought there's some liquid river or something like that there. And so it's a water phoenix, it's not a firebird. So I discovered this in stages. First the peacock, then in a few years the phoenix, then a few months later, oh, it's a water phoenix. So that's my earliest memory. And that is the story of the water phoenix. And it's one of the sweetest memories I have. And one of my those conversation starters, icebreakers, if you will, with people are, what is your first memory? So for me it is this, and I thought that would be a great way to begin the book. And it's just something that gave me a lot of comfort over the years because I was very imaginative, and I just kept going back to that.
Yes, this mythical creature is also symbolic of that it rises,
That's
but
right.
not from the fire. But
Yes, and
absolutely,
it's so interesting you mentioned that because one reviewer got it so right in the Daily O. They said that we don't have to burn like the
yes,
phoenix to heal. You can be a water phoenix too, and a water phoenix is something I aim to be. That I'm ready to dive deep into the ocean of the most uncomfortable emotions we have, because that is the most radical act of self love, and honestly the only way to freedom.
so apt, Ritu. Okay, Ritu, your first book was titled "An Ordinary Life." Was was based on the life of the actor Nawazuddin Siddiqui, which
Hmm.
was again a very amazing book. Of course, I read it and I became your fan instantly after reading it, because the outlook that you gave to the word ordinary opened a whole new meaning to the subject. Okay, Ritu, but that book was somebody else's that you wrote. But writing your own memoir, how difficult and different was it? Because going down the life, you must have, I don't know how many times you must have kept going, coming back, going back, writing a memoir of childhood that too. How different and how difficult it was.
Yeah, this memoir, the similarity between An Ordinary Life and The Water Phoenix is that both of them begin at birth and end like decades later. I mean, Nawaz is much older than me, I don't know, 40s, 50s, and mine ends pretty much when I hit 30, a little more. So 30, 32 or so. So it's spanning a whole section, and I actually didn't want it to be a memoir. Everyone tells me it reads like a novel, except for the last parts on forgiveness and all that, which is more like a manual, if you will. So that was my aim. I wanted it to be auto fiction, because I could do more justice to the characters. And I was so tired because I'd already written a memoir. I had already my column is memoirish because it's on my life. I'm taking a break from it now to focus on a novel. um, it's actually, it wasn't so hard. However, because I come from a journalistic background and research and facts are very big, it's just so many, over a decade in journalism, so it's just hardwired, and that made me research a lot. So people say it's very visual. The places I mentioned, they don't even exist in like that anymore. If you go to Nandurbar, I don't think I'd be able to even find my way. The house is there, I think, I guess, because it's a railway colony. But apart from that, everything else seemed very different, and there's so little available on the internet. So I think place in memoir is very important because you have to still make it believable. It's not like Harry Potter where it's fantasy and you are playing God and you can just invent everything. So the process is very similar to writing fiction, because even in fiction, if you've written mythological fiction, right, you still have to research, and then how do you blend it into the story. So the process is really not that different. I think with the memoir it's easier because with fiction you're just trying to find what the narrative is, at least in the first draft, and of course it keeps evolving. And with memoir, the first draft is, I mean, you kind of have some idea when you're writing, because you have some idea of what happened, who the characters are. In the end, it's still surprising. So there is that. And apart from that, I don't know, I didn't set out to write a memoir, like I said, but everybody said that there is no book like this which offers real solutions. uh,
Absolutely.
so it should be a memoir because it's so powerful. And Monica, the latest stats, which also appeared in an article on TV 18 recently, Network 18, sorry, was that there's just in 2019 alone, 1 billion kids were abused all over the world. That's more than the number of COVID-19 patients in 2020. So it is a pandemic that has been there on the planet. I don't know since when. And
Ever since,
yeah,
I
yeah.
guess.
And it's always invisible in plain sight, to quote from the book, because with child abuse, you're growing up, everything is new, you're figuring it out, you don't even know what has happened, your body's screaming. It takes years, and as you will see in this book, it took a long time for me to figure out I was abused. It is not normal. So it's like every few years I'm figuring something out. And by the time I'm a teenager, I'm like, ready to just hit anybody, just dying of anger, and people think it's teenage angst, because by then I've figured out that all the people who were supposed to protect me didn't. And in every family where there is abuse, and mostly it's people you trust, because how else will they have access to a child? There are signs, people are aware, but it makes it very uncomfortable to have relationships, and it makes things very difficult. So have you seen the movie Monsoon Wedding?
Not
It's
really. I've heard the songs.
yeah, it's pretty ancient now. But in that movie, the Nasiruddin Shah actually stands up. abuse is like one of the main narratives there, and goes against the big family abuser, uh, Rajat Kapoor, and that never happens in real life. And it's so much harder for the boys because so many men have reached out to me, and I wish this would have happened before, because I would have mentioned that in that whole abuse chapter. I think there's just one boy's case mentioned. um,
Yes.
yeah, because it's much harder on them, because society forces so much on them anyway to repress their emotions. Boys don't cry, all that nonsense, which luckily we are seeing reduced now. So it's even harder for them. So we just need the more stories come out, the more we'll talk, and it's quite different from me too, because children don't have that power.
Absolutely, because while I read, I could see that a 6-year-old child who doesn't, he or her doesn't even understand the body. I mean, they're still exploring their own body. They wouldn't be even learning the parts, names of the parts, and something. We all are born with instincts. We are born with that gut that tells us, this is right and this is not right. So at the tender age of 6, when something like that happened, it would take years to understand, to even call it abuse or whatever. But that time, all you knew, no, something bad has happened,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that too when
yeah.
it was like near experience.
You're breaking up, Monica.
Am I audible?
No, no, you are. Yeah, you're breaking up. I missed the last part.
That's why I'm saying, at the age of 6, when that event occurred, back,
Hmm.
I mean, within few minutes of a near death experience that you had, that was again a abuse of bullying by elder
Yes.
cousins.
Yes, yes,
So
and
that,
it was very extreme bullying. And see, that's the thing. I didn't know this was not normal. And people around said, "Oh, it's just kids, and they'll be okay when they grow up." And that's true. I didn't know that was a near-death experience. All this I figured out only as a grown-up, not even in my early 20s. Because see, the important part of this book is that life is going on. It's not just a trauma fest. There are a lot of funny things. There's a ton of animals and making sense of madness, and so that's how life is. All this is going on along with it, so it takes a few years to figure it out. So that's actually, it has impacted how I parent my kid completely, because I ask him to sit down. How are you feeling? Where does it feel in your body? So for me, I'm quite an anxious person still, and so for me it comes in this area, and for him it comes in his stomach. And then because he's present, it goes away so quickly. I got a tummy ache, and I was like, okay, you're not speaking your truth, right? So you feel you're powerless, because, well, they still have a little, how much ever open you try, we're still in modern society, and there are still things kids have to do. So then we'll do like a lion's pose in yoga or something, and he's literally okay within minutes. So rather than having to grow up and figure that out, it's a tool, it's become a habit, and I hope he uses it as he grows up. That, okay, just a quick feeling check. It's like an emotional vipassana called by T.S. Swan, which something I mentioned in the last part of the book. That's a huge tool.
the, hello, can you hear me? You're
Yeah,
breaking.
I can hear you perfectly.
Yeah, okay. So yes, that's there. Okay, there was another thing which I read in the book, about that boy, the abuse
Mhm.
that a boy goes through. There's one story that you mentioned.
Yeah, yeah,
Another
yeah.
mother shared that what her grown-up son told her, that
Yeah.
the auntie they loved, who had watched him for years, had more than touched him
Yes.
and done so regularly all the while,
Yes. Yes.
genuinely loving and taking care of you. The predators are
Very much there.
in the family. I
Yes.
mean, you can't distinguish between the predator and the protector. Even the
Uh,
child, even if they have this gut, I guess the elders, somewhere the grown-ups tend to get confused themselves and they confuse the child.
Yes. One thing is that the grown-ups are also messed up, pretty messed up. And it's also teachers. I was abused by a teacher as well. And but not as terribly. See, this is what happens. You hear other people's abuse stories and you realize I'm really lucky. Like, how pathetic is that it didn't go to that extent. There are kids, who have been abused by their teachers, and I think it's improving now, and we were really lucky, I think, to have better teachers. But I went to 9 schools before I landed up at our school at the age of 9, because and that's also there in the book, right? Because my dad was getting transferred so much, and he was just, fighting for the workers' rights and everything. So, but very, very quite an adventure of a childhood. But I had been to all these schools. I had seen it, and I used to be a very, very feisty, very confident until I got, heavily bullied and I shut down. So that's what happens to kids. That the teachers bully them. They come from dysfunctional homes, and now we realize that almost every family is dysfunctional. It's not as simple as Tolstoy's, all happy families are alike, and every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. It's more like each family is both happy and unhappy. Like there are moments. I think the world is really realizing that now. So kids, the best thing we can do is make them feel validated, and that's pretty much it. Don't tell them if they are afraid of something that it doesn't exist, because it manifests something somewhere else. A kid may have a UTI infection, or maybe going to the bathroom too often because they're nervous. You have to, like, because they also don't know. It's not that they don't want to tell you. In my case, I actually went and told people I don't feel like this, that, and the aunties in my family said, "Oh, we are aware. Just stay away. Just stay away. Just stay away." So I was like, well, if the grown-ups cannot protect themselves, then I got to do it myself. And so I've been very self-sufficient emotionally since ever since I can remember, um, having been left with no choice. So this is what happens to kids who've been abused. Most of them shut down, and this book is not about that. It's about just breaking down, falling apart. It's the only way to
It's
rise.
about breaking down and the resurrecting and the
Yes, yes.
rebuild
Not
parenting.
suppress it, then it becomes cancer or all these illnesses. The energetic imprint is often trauma, um, and the book focuses a lot on emotional abuse. And, whether you have a, I don't know, a breakup, or get laid off, or stressful situations at home, at work, an accident. Trauma is everywhere in modern life, and it's all emotional abuse. So the manual for healing is the same, honestly. So I think this book provides those answers.
I think if wouldn't be wrong if we would say that fear and trauma are somewhere synonymous with life. But what matters is that how soon you figure out your defense or maybe your survivals. Like in your case, if I see that at a very tender age you picked up reading, and
Mhm.
I guess you must have started writing also. So somewhere, can you say that reading and writing were your defense or your escape routes from the trauma, the fear, or whatever that went around?
Uh,
So
yeah. So it was my coping mechanism, but it's also because it was the only thing I had. I was really bad at everything else. I also didn't have any help. No, seriously, I was reading ahead of my times, and everyone thought I was a prodigy, and I was talking so much ahead of my age. But that's where it ended. After that, I was kind of behind in everything. And of course, we used to be in such a rat race competition, a very, very competitive culture. And I was always very gentle, very solitary, and very, in my own world, which, if you remember from school, everyone thought I was a big extrovert and always, but so both of them coexist. So to me, that was the only comfort I had. And now I realize that because I wrote so much, it didn't take me too much time to write the memoir. I wrote it in like 5 months. I could have finished it in 3 months, but childcare issues, as you're a mom too, kind of rules everything.
yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
yeah, so I think that really helped me, because I did not realize I was processing so much. I would write to my favorite characters in Alice in Wonderland, the Cheshire Cat and everybody, that
Mm.
this is what happened. And because is this new, because everything is new. Is this normal? I didn't know. So I didn't know, I was processing it as I wrote. So that really helped. uh, I think helped keep me intact. So it was a coping mechanism, but I wasn't aware of it.
Absolutely.
Only now when I look
Your,
back, it makes sense.
the whole book, the level of imaginations, I mean, it's like next to fantasy almost, I can say. And when you've written it in your almost in your 30s, and the vivid description, the minutest of imaginative work that you've put in, it just puts me like under awe. Okay, okay. I mean, remembering all that is okay, but your imagination is outstanding. So you were born with it, or you've
We
developed it, or
all
is it somewhere your son has given you this?
we have all been born with it. It's only that I nurtured it. Whatever we nurture grows. So it's the only thing I had, and even today, I'm very much like that. I'm never bored. So when my kid says he's bored, I have zero empathy for him. I'm like super mean. Then that just entertain yourself. I don't know. It's like there's something interesting happening wherever. It's not like India. India is truly very very interesting. America is quite boring unless you're in New York City or something. But yeah, it, it's a gift as a writer. You start observing things that are invisible in plain sight.
Ah, that's there. There's one more thing that I'd like to read here, Ritu, which was like quite sensitive. Uh, it reads, I used pencils, pens, sticks, and whatever tools and pressed the wound, causing it to bleed again, bleed and bleed and bleed until no more blood was left to reach my brain. It was my first suicide attempt, the suicide attempt of a 6-year old. It was simply too innocent to be successful. So, there is repetitive mention of suicide. Uh, what is your say on this, Ritu? That after any person, child, or whatever, undergoes any abuse of any kind, emotional, physical, sexual, whatever, do they develop a self hatred or a hatred against life that they go on to put it into action? That gift of life that they are ready to give up.
Uh,
What you were only 6.
Yeah, so it wasn't a gift, it was hell. And so you're taught when you're little there's heaven and there's hell, but when life is such a hell, what could be worse? So you're ready to go there. And that's what why this book is so important. It doesn't sugarcoat anything. That's probably why it has somehow, reached heights that we never imagined, because it's everybody's story. It's not just my story. It's like cookie cutter. You talk to an abuse victim, mental illnesses, suicide attempts, but most of them are not open about it. See, you don't feel validated by the world. You're very isolated. You're a child. You're already super vulnerable. And then you start attracting more and more because that's the energy you're putting out. So for me, I think losing my mom, was my core trauma, the abandonment I felt, because before that, I really had a heavenly childhood, so much nature, and I also spent a lot of time with myself. And now when I look back, I'm like, oh my God, no kids have that today, with screens and, unless you're growing up, I don't know, in South Africa and on some farm or something, I don't know. So it was really very sweet, and to suddenly go from that to the complete opposite was a lot. So I think then I started to attract, all the bullying and then the abuse, and it just went on and on. And all the while, the grown-ups thought that they were providing me, with roof and food and whatever it is, the physical comforts, and that was enough. And because I was so used to being there for myself, I realized that it's not. But if this is how grown-ups are, then it's pretty robotic. And they don't know. So then it's a very natural reaction for that child to be suicidal at age 6, and for every abuse victim. So I'll tell you something, Monica. When I was in my 20s and I mentioned it, somebody told me, you just want to draw attention. That just was like somebody had put a knife into my heart or something. It was the worst thing because this was a friend. And that's when I'm like, I'm going to be really badass. I'm going to love myself so much that nobody's ever going to do that to me again. Because these are friends. You see, it's very easy to cut out toxic people from your life, but people who are kind, and unfortunately, this is the only way they know, who've been, they have been your friends. So I've become so good, and I feel today, actually, this sounds pathetic, but I actually feel I'm so emotionally resilient. I don't need anybody. It's not to shut people out, but you realize that nobody can fulfill you that way, including our own children, which is like the highest form of
The
love.
insight that you receive.
You know that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, and it's nice to have a craft that is satisfactory, whatever it is. For us, it's writing, a
That's
pottery, and anything. Um, so to me, that's all it is. I think people who have been abused have an advantage if they think of it that way, that they're so aware instead of suppressing, getting angry, getting suicidal. If they just break down, face it, and love themselves the way only they,
Feel
just about being present, really. There's a column I did for the Mumbai Mirror on writing as therapy, in which it's the same thing. Whatever you feel, you write it out, because you're staying present with
it.
it. Then it has run its course, and you will see a lot of illnesses just start to reduce into this
Sometimes
regular. Yeah, because it's left your body. The body storing everything, and only now
yes,
Western medicine recognizing what we have in the East always known, that it's, whatever they call stress, but it's trauma.
absolutely. Okay, there's this mention of this event that Ritu that occurred to you, and you mentioned it as Kundalini awakening, which was, I guess, a beginning of a big breakthrough to your journey on healing and picking those therapies and alternative ways of healing. So, what is Kundalini awakening, and what was that event like? Because that whole description really shook me. I had to keep my book away for 10 minutes to like, because I know you, and more than that, it was a memoir. So, I really felt कि ये सब पिक्चरों में देखा है मैंने. ये I mean, like, okay, this happened. So it really kind of, put me also into it. Ki, what is this all about? Like, because even I don't know much of it. So I said, what is this Kundalini awakening of?
Well, as they say, truth is stranger than fiction. And actually, people say that it's a magical realism memoir because of all the childhood parts, and all of this, the bird and everything. But that's not true. The reason it had to be a magical realism memoir, which you said is borderline fantasy, but it really happened, is because of those parts, all the surreal events that happen in growth
Hmm.
code, if you will. Because uh, people just assume that only children have these things, imaginary things. When you grow up,
Yeah.
it's different. So to me, I was a hardcore atheist for almost all of my life. Just I think past, I think 6 years or so, when it all changed because of that event, 6 or 7 years. um I did not know what was happening to me. I was beginning to hear things, see things. It really helped to be in California. It's hippie haven, if you will, and everybody's into all these new age things. And I would shun it, like I would avoid it like the plague, or as these days we say, like the coronavirus. I would just avoid it like whatever. Uh, so when all this happened, nothing made sense. Nobody understood me, and now I realize it was my emotional body literally committing suicide, if you will. And the descriptions, all the details are there in the, because there was so much trauma I was carrying all my life, and then of course you grow up as a woman in India. Every day somebody is just shouldering your breasts or something like that. That's a different hell. It's just normal. We have a cute word, eve teasing. It's something people can go to jail for in America or in most of the first world, what we deal with on a day-to-day basis in India. So there's all of that, because we're already carrying that load. There's no mother figure. There was no mother figure to help me out with all of that. So I was really collapsing. And then I had postpartum depression. And I think that was the final catalyst to me literally being at the brink of insanity. Those were symptoms of schizophrenia. You're hearing things, you're seeing things that
Hmm.
are not there. And especially when you were as deeply rooted in logic as I had chosen to be, because I had suppressed my imaginary self, thinking that now I'm big, and then I got into
Hmm.
that typical victim mode, which is survival, tough, trying, but still I've remained pretty gentle, I think. But at least mentally to go, hardcore logic. And also I failed heavily in my writing by going that route. So those were symptoms. Now, if you go to YouTube and you Google schizophrenia TED Talk, there's a whole series on where they will tell you this is basically what in North, no, yeah, in some North African cultures and in South American cultures, shamans view it as a gift that you're able to see into other realms. And here I'm hardcore atheist, not believing in anything. So it was a death of ego, and ego, I mean, in the Freudian term, identity, not great pride, but it was a death of of my identity, of everything I had known. And because that yoga teacher gave me a meditation, and because I had no religion, I didn't think of, I had no religious background,
That's good.
whatever the nuns forced on us in boarding school. You were not in the boarding, so you were saved from a lot of it. I know some of them will watch this and be like, me too. But come on, I mean, we get punished and and we had to say our father. It's quite hilarious, honestly.
That's,
Uh, yeah, so
my grandparents underwent this anxiety thing when they knew I was, my mom put me into missionary. They're like, now she's going to turn into Christian and come back.
no, no, no. For me, it wasn't. I mean, I respect all religions. You should do whatever works for you. But there was that, I felt by the time I left Mount Abu, I was practically a nun. Then living in Bombay kind of just made me slowly
Come
set it all up.
slowly.
Because then I was in Bandra, which is like all these film stars and all are there, so they dress up very differently, and I'm like having a total, whatever has been ingrained into you day by day, shedding it. So coming back to that, so those were symptoms of schizophrenia, and that's a serious mental illness. But because I found this, I'm not saying everybody who has schizophrenia, should just abandon their medication or whatever therapy. Not at all. This is what worked for me. Everybody has their own path. But because she gave me that meditation, it really calmed me down, and I was really feeling things in my body I still cannot explain. Like if this is my hand, I could feel electricity-ish kind of things still here. Then slowly I got into the concept of energy. Then later on I trained and became a Reiki master and teacher. Then I abandoned it all. So it just started me on a path which was very difficult for me to accept because I was a hardcore atheist. And now I don't do anything. I've seen patients, with cancer, with epilepsy, who used to come to me for energy healing because I didn't do traditional Reiki. I did exactly what's there in this book, which is I would give them a metaphysical diagnosis of their, trauma. And there's the last person, and then I left it all. But there was a person whose breast cancer. She kind of healed herself because she did the inner work. So it all comes down to trauma. It may sound very woo woo, but I don't know. I don't think it's so different from believing that a pill can cure you or whatever. I don't think it's contradictory. I think they're complementary, and we are starting to see psychiatrists open up to that here. So
Yes.
so just the whole act of meditation, which forced me to be present with everything I had suppressed, kind of freed me. And if you've seen the movie A Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe, have
Mm. No, I haven't seen. I've heard
you
of it. I haven't seen it.
So he has schizophrenia, and he's a Nobel Prize winning physicist. So his intelligence is on literally out of this world. Very calm, very sweet person. And again, he cannot distinguish between his visions. And then suddenly he realizes, oh my God, no, that is a vision, because the little girl who kept coming to him never grows up. She's the same age and she looks the same way. When children, grow up very, very drastically compared to adults, like physically, it's very obvious. So then he figured it out. And so in his also, he finally makes peace with his demons, that they're there, okay, but my power is attention and focus. I can focus on something else, and meditation helps us get there. Anything, actually, anything that's completely immersive.
There's some.
Uh, Swimming, sports, whatever. But meditation is is consciously you're there. So
That's true. Okay, Ritu, coming to the concluding chapter, which you've titled as "Life as Art." That this is, you are not your story, but life as an art. So, what's
yeah.
your word on life as an art? You've
Um,
specifically mentioned it like as a flow that you learned, you adopted, and you have now put it in your that you flow. Somewhere something to do with water, flow, and acceptance.
yes. Yes. So I'm still, while I have left all of that behind, all the new age stuff that's mentioned there, I think the beliefs I most relate to at the moment are just Taoist philosophy, if you've heard of it, and of something called Wu Wei, which is doing by non-doing. Basically, the way nature is, everything just grows itself. I'm looking at all the trees in my yard around. None of them have leaves yet. They are filled with fruit and leaves. They will be by March, April onwards. So that is how nature lives. It lives life as art. It doesn't decide, this is my ego, this is my identity. That is the whole problem. We believe we are our story, which is our ego, which is our identity, which is made of a whole bunch of conditioning by people. Are you there, Monica? I think we lost you. Okay, I'm going to wait for 2 minutes. Um, Monica, are you there? Okay, I think we've lost her. So thank you to everybody for joining. I don't know how we're going to take this forward, but any okay, you're back. I thought
Yeah.
you were lost and we were running out
Some
of time.
technical, some yes, yes, I'm struggling with that. So I guess Ritu will continue with this last concluding line from you for life as an art. Life and
Yes, so we live life like nature without identity. That eases a lot of burden without history. And if you start living every minute to minute, anyway, this book is very much about living life minute to minute. Um, but when we choose it consciously, it's a very liberating experience. We can choose what we want, kind of like Russell Crowe in Beautiful Mind, or here when I was getting symptoms of schizophrenia, that where is my focus going, or what is it that I want to create with my life? Who is it that I want to be? And I learned from my kid who's Batman now, and whatever nowadays he's his own characters. So because that's how we were meant to be here, and I was coming to the Taoist philosophy of Wu Wei, which is how nature grows, doing through non-doing. Nature doesn't work hard to make a rose grow or a fruit grow. And right now, all the trees look very dead and skeletal around me. There's nothing on them, not a single leaf. And yet, we know that they are very much alive. The birds still rest in them. I'm just talking about what I can see from around where I'm sitting in my own yard. And
no, but
that the trees
that's
have come
very
back.
right. You're saying that
I cannot hear you, Monica.
absolutely very, very, very well said, Ritu. Okay, before signing, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I just wanted to
I
add
guess we are
one.
having some network issues. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I just wanted to add one last thing because this might be helpful to people. The way to do that is through forgiveness. And that's why I say forgiveness is the most selfish choice you can make. It is the most self loving choice you can make, but you cannot force it.
Yes.
It's only like it comes right at the end when I'm like, I've had it. Now I'm choosing to live after like a whole bunch of, I don't know, countless suicide attempts. And now I'm choosing to live. And and now I realize life is truly glorious. And thanks to the imagination from my childhood, I really feel I'm never alone. Nature speaks to me. I love quarantine. I wish I could be in even more solitude than this. Uh, I'm hopeless for not showing up anywhere. Like people, my close friends are like, "You're never there," whatever. I need too much time on my own. So that all comes from forgiveness, and you become very free. And of course, you can only do that when you're physically away from the abuser or if the abuser has died. But to live life like art, because we are all masterpieces and it's a blank canvas and you can put whatever color you want every minute. Life can truly be magical. I'm living proof. And everybody sees me as this very exuberant person, and so they were very shocked when this book came out. Pretty much everybody, like you yourself. But
Yeah.
that's testimony that you can kind of go to hell and come back. And
That's what I said. When I picked up this book, first thought was it was really brave of you to write something so sensitive. But when I was after reading, I really heartfelt felt that, good you wrote it. There are people who
mm,
must have, I'm not talking about any sexual abuse or whatever, any sort of abuse. The
yes,
book ends, it gives hope, actually. The
yes,
last section that of forgiveness and healing, it gives hope to any ailing heart that is carrying any trauma, anxiety, fear, or whatever on day-to-day basis. So this book is more about hope. Thank you so much for writing this, Ritu.
thank you, Monica. What a lovely conversation this was. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ritu. Before we sign off, on behalf of Ahmedabad Book Club, Karma Foundation, big thank you to you and to all our viewers, to Ahmedabad International Literature Festival, the Bookish Owl, the Bloomsbury for trusting us and giving us this platform. Thank you so much, Ritu. Have
Thank
a
you.
nice day and good night to the viewers. Thank you so much.
Goodbye, everybody.
Good night.